from the flight deck. This is the Plane Jockeys Podcast, where we dig into some of the stories and personalities you've seen on Airline Videos live. Our estimated time en route is, well, however long these guys want to chat. Now sit back and relax and enjoy the show. It's a lot more fun than reading the safety card. I promise.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Airline Videos Live Plane Jockeys Podcast. I am Plane Jockey Kevin. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. We have a special guest, Brett Snyder, with the Cranky Flier. Brett, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
So, Brett, let's start with the big picture for the sake of people who are asking. Who and what is the Cranky Flier?
That is the big picture, I guess. Well, I started Cranky Flier. It was over 15 years ago now. I just started writing about the industry, the airline industry. So my background is in working for the airlines. I did pricing and marketing, and ended up writing about the airline industry. And the idea was to talk about it from the perspective of someone who understands it and has worked in it, but also try to make it more accessible to anyone who might be interested in our crazy industry here.
Gotcha. So did you get bit by the aviation bug? Was it something you always dreamed about working in the aviation industry from the get-go, or how did that all come about?
Yeah, it's a great question. I did get bit by the bug, but I couldn't tell you where the bug came from.
Okay.
There's no history of that in my family at all. You see a lot of people that their parents were in the industry or something. I had none of that. My parents had no interest in any of this. But I liked it ever since I was a little kid. And I don't know where it came from. But, when I was little, my grandmother took me to what was then called the Sheraton Plaza Lorena, which is now the Sheraton Gateway at LAX. Uh-huh. And she got a room, and we just, for my birthday, we'd sit there and watch airplanes.
Ah.
So yeah, it's been there forever. I don't think I ever expected that I'd end up writing about this, and Cranky's grown into a bunch of other areas as well. In fact, at one point I wanted to be a CEO of an airline, but then I learned what that entailed and realized that was probably terrible.
Well, I mean, you're known for not being afraid to say what you think, yet you also seem to have a lot of friends high up in the airlines as well. Are you surprised by that?
No, I'm not, because I think, from my perspective, and plenty of people will disagree because that's the nature of the world, but I'm at least fair about it. I think there are plenty of people that talk about the industry like, oh, they're horrible, they're out to get you, everything's terrible. And that's just not realistic, right? But there are plenty of things that people high up in the industry know. They're like, well, we're doing that. And it may make sense for us, but we understand that people don't like it and whatever it may be. So as long as I continue to write what I think is a fair take on things, then, it hasn't really been an issue. I haven't had anyone come to me and say, look, man, if you do that, I'm never going to talk to you again or something like that.
Do you get a lot of feedback from the airlines and saying,
not directly from not in an official capacity. Right. So, it's very rare that I'll hear from the communications teams or anything, unless I've gotten something wrong. Okay. And then they'll be very quick to point it out and say, hey, actually you said this. And usually it doesn't change the point of the post or anything like that. It's usually just a factual detail, and I fix those right away. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't want to pretend I'm not. So that's about it. But I do hear from other people in the industry, in an off the record, non-official format. A fair bit. It depends on the topic and depends on the airline. The airlines all have their own very different personalities, and I find that a lot of the people fit into those quite well. So some like to talk, some don't.
I mean, basically, so you have the Cranky Flier website. You have the social media with news and opinion pieces. You also have the Cranky Talk podcast. I mean, it sounds like you're pretty busy. You've got things going on all around. Can you kind of describe, maybe if people haven't been to your website or follow you on social media, what kind of news and opinion pieces do you put out there?
Yeah, sure. So, and yes, I'm way too busy for my own good. But so on Cranky Flier, Usually 3 new posts a week. Unlike a lot of sites, I try to do it at the same time. So it usually goes up Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday mornings are kind of the main stories that'll go live, with a couple other links, posts, whatever. But what I'm looking at in those is I'm looking at something that is airline news. I don't break news. I'm not trying to be the first at anything. It's more an analysis after the fact. And so I like to think things through. And, I'll try and take things and see if I can put more context around them. I love digging into data. I use Cerium data a lot for schedules and, traffic data. I use Anuvu data for operational information. So I can kind of go and build these stories and look through them and get a sense of, what it means. And so, I really like to put more color around what's happening in the industry. I think my favorite stuff on the blog itself is probably if there's something where my thoughts are different than conventional wisdom. That's the most fun. But it doesn't always work out that way. And sometimes I'm echoing conventional wisdom, and so be it. I'll just try and put more data and thought around it if I can.
Right. And that sure is a lot of news coming out recently. Obviously, a huge story right now is the potential merger of JetBlue and Spirit. How do you see this all playing out in the next months and years? I mean, what's your take on that?
I don't know, but man, am I glad it's happening, because it makes it really easy to write.
Yes.
I mean, the wild card here, there are a couple wild cards. One is, what will the government do? We don't know how they'll feel about this. We don't know what kind of pressure they'll put on JetBlue to complete the merger in terms of divestments and things like that. So we'll see what that is. And the other wild card is, do we take JetBlue's word at face value, or are they not really giving us the whole story here? And what I mean by that is, you have JetBlue saying, we are JetBlue. We're buying Spirit. They're going to become JetBlue. It's all going to be JetBlue. Well, that may be the case, but what does that mean? Does JetBlue change? Does it adopt any of the Spirit stuff? Does it go to a more dense configuration? Right. Certainly not as dense as Spirit is today. But JetBlue has a cost problem, so it's not gonna do itself any favors by just buying Spirit and taking seats out and flying routes that it's unlikely it's going to make a lot of money on. So those are the two things that I think will determine the future here.
What I mean, we're talking about JetBlue and Spirit. What about Frontier? I mean, they're kind of the one that was kind of pushed to the side. What do you think happens with them?
Man, blue skies ahead for them. They have a ton of airplanes on order already,
right?
And they can move those around because it's Indigo Partners that owns them, has the order across all their subsidiaries, and they have a bunch of different airlines. So they can get more, do less, however Indigo sees fit. But if you do assume that Spirit becomes a higher cost JetBlue, that just creates all this opportunity for Frontier to put those airplanes in places that it wouldn't think about today because Spirit's already in them. Same for Allegiant in that sense, but I don't really see much of a downside for Frontier here. I think it's going to be good news for them.
Right. I mean, it seems like every day there's something new I read everywhere, aviation related. The airlines. I mean, is there any other stories that you kind of see maybe under the radar that you think maybe deserve wider attention right now? Maybe the 777X. There's just every day there seems to be more drama out there.
The 777X, will it ever enter service?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, there's so much that's grabbing the headlines today that it's really, those are the things that people are focusing on. But when you start thinking about longer term, what does all that look like? Like, to me, I'm really curious about, I'd say American has done a lot during the pandemic. They've signed some of these deals to partner with Latin American Airlines. They've closed their LA Pacific hub. They've strengthened the Alaska and JetBlue things. So they've done a lot. And so now that we're coming out of the pandemic, I want to see, does this work? What they've cobbled together, will that be able to come together? So that's something that I find pretty interesting to watch. On United side, you just have some really creative stuff. They did a lot of cool European things this summer.
Right.
Really interested to see which ones work and which ones don't, because I think some of these clearly won't work.
Right.
But if they all work, that means you're probably not trying hard enough to find hidden gems.
Right.
So, we'll see that. And then I think on the Delta side, are they going to do anything? I know that sounds funny, but Delta has been this sort of steady rock through most of it, and they really haven't done much that's newsworthy when you think about it. At least not in a good way. I mean, they're in the news today because they got a slot waiver because they can't even run their New York flights to 80% as required by the slot rules. But that's not a proactive thing. So be curious to see what they're doing. And then there's always Southwest, which they added so many cities during the pandemic. Now they're just trying to catch up,
right,
and see what that looks like and what the next round will be for them. I mean, these are all kind of network related questions, but there's always more than that too. There's what do airlines do with their fleets? Who's going to place new orders? Who's going to start retiring some airplanes? You have some big questions coming up from some of these airlines, and you have onboard products. Everyone's always trying to leapfrog the next. And so, will we have doors on every seat in the world? Like what's going to happen here? So there's nothing that really stands out to me as hey, no one's paying attention and we should be looking at this right this second. But there's a lot of stuff that's just developing, all the foundations being laid.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I mean, the months and the years ahead, I can only imagine this is only going to ramp up. More news. It's going to keep you even more busy.
Well, I mean, at least from my perspective, I keep my content amount the same. So I'm not trying to crank out 50 posts a day here. Right. So I'll just pick the posts that I find most interesting and I'll write those. That's kind of the beauty of me just doing whatever the heck I want. So I'm happy to let others handle the volume. I just like to focus on the things that I think are really interesting.
Excellent. Well, we're getting to know you here, Brett. So much more that we want to dive into. We'll take a little bit of break. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Plane Jockeys podcast.
Folks, again from the flight deck, we hope you're enjoying those luxurious seats and plentiful complimentary beverages. Oh, right. It's a podcast. Well, then we hope you're enjoying the banter. Stay tuned for more.
Oh, yes. More to the story, as they always say. Right, Brett?
You want more.
Yeah,
you can talk
always
forever.
More. Oh, yes. Always more.
There's always sleep on us.
Yes. Always more to the story. Well, you've got a big event coming up in the month of September here at Los Angeles International Airport called Cranky Dorkfest. All right. A lot of people are excited about this event coming up. Can you explain it, about the history, what it's about, and where is the future of this great event here at LAX?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, there's not much to explain. And that's sort of the beauty of it, is that what it is we just go out to the park across from In-N-Out there at the northeast corner of the airport. And we just eat burgers and watch airplanes and have fun. And there's not really a set agenda. It's 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturday, September 17th. And it's kind of funny because people say, well, what are you doing here? When should I be there? When do I do this? Like, doesn't matter. Show up. People come early. People stay late. We just hang out. And it really started, man, I mean, it was over a decade ago. But it started with me just kind of saying, I'm going to go watch airplanes. Who wants to come? Oh. And it's grown from there because, I'll take my kids. I'll go out there all the time. It's great to live so close to it. And yeah, it's grown from there. So when you ask about the future, I think what happens is, things sort of settle around that weekend as being a great time for AvGeeks to be in the LA area.
Right.
And so several years ago, I started working with the NYC aviation guys. And so they do their annual spotting event, which they've done for years, but we now coordinate it so we can do it at the same time.
Okay.
Or on the same weekend so that you get, more people going to all the events. Before the pandemic, we had a thing where LAX started participating and did a little spotting tour, went around out on the ramp over by the Imperial Terminal over there. and did a bus tour around the runways. I'm hoping we might have something with them this year as well. I'm not sure exactly what it'll be, but they say they're interested in something, so stay tuned on that. And yeah, it just is one of those things that when you know the Av geeks are all around, then it's a lot of fun for others to try and come up with their own things. You have group dinners, people can get together, alumni gatherings from airlines, whatever it might be. It's just a great way for people to just lock that in on their calendar and say, okay, I know this weekend I'm going to be in LA and I'm going to do all kinds of Av geekery and have a great time.
Can you kind of explain the day? So it kind of starts at 10 a.m. Everyone just kind of heads over to the grassy area outside the In-N-Out Burger, and we're just kind of standing around, making new friends, meeting people that you maybe don't know or haven't seen in a while, and you got the planes flying right over your head. Of course, like you just said, it's like one of the best places for plane spotting, all at LAX. And then you kind of have a giveaway too, right?
Right. So, well, first of all, it officially technically starts at 11.
Oh, like 11. Okay.
Come early, go late. It's, whatever. But yeah, so it starts then usually around noon. So whenever people get there, I'm handing out along with a few other folks, a few other regulars. We just hand out raffle tickets. There's no cost to it. You just get one ticket per person. And then we get together 12-ish, 12:30 and just pick names out of a hat and start giving away things that it's mostly the airlines give to auction off.
Right.
And, usually the big prizes tend to be either a model of some sort. Mm-hmm. Last year, for example, Southwest gave an old 727 away from the old days, which was awesome.
Wow.
We had United gave away a Boom model, which was really cool. And then, you also have some airlines giving away free tickets.
Oh, yeah. No, Plane Jockey Rudy, he won 2 round trip tickets on Spirit last year.
There you go.
Oh, yes.
That's great. Spirit's got a great presence out of LA. Use them up before they're JetBlue.
Exactly.
But yeah, so we have all that, and it's just random. You pick it out, and then some airlines will give other little goodies too, stickers, whatever it might be, and so there's always something that people walk away with. We had was that last year? Frontier sent me a stack of A319 safety cards.
Oh yeah,
because they were retiring the A319, so they just had a bunch of them left over.
Very nice,
and so everyone can take one of those. So it's fun. There's a lot of stuff. A few big prizes every year. I don't even know what they are this year. I know of at least 2, but others just say we'll get back to you when we figure out our plan here. But it becomes a game for them to think, what's the biggest Av geeky thing we can come up with that people are going to want.
Well, I mean, we did an interview with you at the end of last year's event, and I remember you talking about how obviously the year prior was the pandemic year, and but you were surprised at the turnout last year. That would have been 2021, and I can only imagine what the turnout is going to be this year and moving forward. I mean, where do you see this possibly going to? I mean, obviously at some point, I honestly think that you're going to run out of space there outside the In-N-Out Burger, and you might have to move this to the LA Convention Center. I mean, I feel like that's where it's going.
Yeah, I hope not. I mean, that ruins the whole beauty of it, that there's no organization to it.
Right.
It's the kind of thing, I suppose, if it got really big enough, you could maybe go to the Proud Bird or something. Right. They have that huge outdoor space. But it's hard to say that you'd actually run out of space there from what it's been, but you never know. You're right. I mean, last year was the biggest turnout yet, and I think a lot of that was just people wanted to go somewhere.
Right.
It had been so long, but we really didn't have a lot of the international folks for obvious reasons. They couldn't really get in.
Right.
So we should have more this year, but I honestly never know because there's no RSVP. There's no anything, and frankly, one day I could just show up and I might be the only one sitting there and I'd still be happy.
I don't think that's going to happen, Brett. I mean, we talk about it on our live show constantly, and if you look at the chat, there are a lot of people that are excited about that weekend and saying, I am going to Cranky Dorkfest. So I think you're going to have plenty of people there this year.
That's great. As long as everyone's having a good time. I mean, for me, it becomes the thing where now I get to see people every year that, I've seen for a decade or more, and you don't get to see them too often, but it's a great time to get together, and then it inevitably peels off. And last year it was a shame because the Proud Bird wasn't open, but In past years, we'd just move over to the Proud Bird later and have some drinks with people. Last year, I think we just went into El Segundo. But hey, Proud Bird's open again, so
yeah,
you know.
Yeah, and we want to make sure that everyone understands that this is a free event, correct?
Absolutely, it's free. And that's the whole thing. There's not much put into it, so there's no cost, and it's just a way to hang out. And the airlines like to contribute their goodies to make it a little more fun for everyone who shows up. But it's just a pure fun event for people to hang out. No cost. Only potential cost is if you have to pay for parking somewhere. It can get a little dicey there.
Well, I am certainly looking forward to it. Boy, you certainly created an event at LAX. I mean, the only one, you know? I mean, really, honestly, when you think about it, you've created a event outside of Los Angeles International, one of the biggest airports in the world, something that people will look forward to now every single year. That's quite the achievement.
Well, you know, LAX is a huge part of that because you think about just the variety and all the wide bodies and the location of them flying right over your head. But
right.
It's a lot harder to put something together. And I don't want to throw any airport under the bus, but you know, if all you see are Southwest 737s, it's not quite the same draw as when you see Emirates. I mean, you know, everyone's watching your channel all the time. Like this,
exactly.
That's the beauty of it all.
Right.
So yeah, LAX is the star of the show for sure. I'm just there to enjoy it with everyone.
Excellent. Well, Brett, I mean, how can people check out you? Give us your website, your social media. How can they check out your website and whatnot?
Sure. So the blog, the site we were talking about, it's crankyflier.com. That's flyer with an I. And Twitter is also at Cranky Flier, which is the most social I get these days. And we do have an air travel assistance business. Didn't talk about it here, but it's full travel agency work. And that's crankyconcierge.com.
Okay.
There's a bunch of other stuff, but I'm not going to bore everyone with it.
Well, you also have the podcast. Where can you can find the podcast on Spotify and whatnot?
Yeah, those are everywhere there. And also, I do put a post on crankyflier.com anytime a new one goes live. So if you're not subscribed on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever, then you'll see the notification on the blog. But that goes up every 2 weeks. For the most part, that's me and Dave on my team, who is not an airline guy at all. So it makes a good back and forth between us.
Gotcha. And give us the date one more time for the Cranky Dorkfest here in the year 2022.
Sure. It's Saturday, September 17th, and it's from 11 to 1 or earlier or later, whatever.
I mean, let me ask you one last question here. I mean, you're in the aviation, you're in the travel industry. Would you consider yourself a plane spotter or not?
I would consider myself a plane spotter. Now, I don't take photos.
Okay.
So I'm not that. I don't do that, but I would absolutely consider myself a plane spotter.
Okay. With that being said, can I ask you what your favorite plane is? Your favorite, that's the most asked question for me. Kevin, what is your favorite plane? I got to ask you that question.
To spot specifically, you mean?
You know, when you look at it, you're just like, yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful plane. Maybe you've flown on it. I just recently flew on the Delta A350. Even before that, I said, well, the A350, just by looking at it, is my favorite plane. Now I finally, got to fly on one. I'm like, okay, I can back up my opinion on it. And it definitely right now is my favorite plane. So you've got to, you fly a lot. You look at the planes a lot. There's got to be one that maybe just top of your mind.
Yeah. I mean, the 747 any day,
right?
All day. There's nothing that I like watching more. And, sadly we just don't get a lot of them anymore. But
right.
Lufthansa will still bring the 74 in, and we have all the cargo birds, of course. But yeah, I mean, a 74 is on any airline. It's the best. I used to love when KLM still had them. Those were awesome to watch. But yeah, that's easily my favorite of all the airplanes that are out there to watch. The A380 is always fun to watch too, but man, that is an ugly airplane. I love the airplane, but it just looks like something's not right.
Yeah. Since we're on the topic of the A380, I've always said that the A380 is not dead yet. I honestly believe it will be brought back, obviously with a new engine option. Do you feel that same way, or do you feel like it's completely done?
I think it's dead.
You think it's okay?
Yeah, I don't think there's any hope. I mean, Emirates says they want it to live. Emirates is the only airline that's ever really cared enough about that airplane.
Right.
No one else really likes it. Others fly it because they don't have newer airplanes yet. Like, what Qatar says, yeah, that was a mistake, but we'll keep flying it until we have our newer orders. So, Emirates is talking. They're making noise like they want it to come back, but I don't see how there's any way to justify that without some massive commitment from a whole bunch of other airlines besides just Emirates. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, because
I think it's dead.
Yeah, I mean, you would this time around, you would absolutely need some U.S. airline to kind of jump on board, right?
Oh, no U.S. airline wants that.
Well, I know in the past they never did, but I mean, certainly this time around, I mean, that would really certainly jumpstart things. So, I mean, that's never going to happen.
Yeah, if they were interested, it would make a difference. But the 747 is, well, I guess it is done for passenger, right? I think it's just cargo left. So they're done with those. The A380 is gone. I mean, they've got the 777X. They got the A350-1000. This is the future of the high end, large passenger capacity airplane. The A380, it just doesn't work, especially with 4 engines too. When you can do a 777X or a 350-1000 with 2 engines, it just doesn't make sense.
Right. Well, I guess time will tell. And then obviously you're going to be a very busy person. Lots of new news stories certainly coming out in the months and years to come. Brett, thank you so much for joining us here on the Plane Jockeys podcast. I can't wait to hang out at the Cranky Dorkfest coming up next month.
Yeah, you're welcome. I look forward to seeing you and everybody else. Come on down.
All right. Brett, thank you so much. You've been listening to another episode of the Airline Videos Live Plane Jockeys podcast. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Well, folks, we finally made it. That's good, because the first officer and I have talked so much, I feel like I know him better than my brother.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Plane Jockeys podcast, a companion to Airline Videos Live.
Goodbye.
Find us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Airline Videos, or visit airlinevideos.com. On behalf of the entire crew, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again on the next Plane Jockeys podcast.
Bye-bye.